recipient of ACUPOLL. So ACUPOLL was awarded 2 different Confirm It Air Awards. That was the Achievement in Insight and Research. These were for their insight and innovation throughout the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. So with that, Jeff, welcome and thank you for coming on today. I'm really excited to share your story because it's an awesome one. But to get us started, can I ask you to tell us a little bit, for those who may not be aware, tell us about ACUPOLL.
Yeah, thank you, Holly. Happy to be here, and thanks everybody for listening. We like to say that ACUPOLL has really transcended the status quo for its 30 years since its founding, focused on helping drive success in 3 areas: growth strategy, innovation, and marketing execution. We started by innovating hybrid qual-quant methodologies for the industry in the 90s, and have since innovated in how we evaluate concepts, packages, and ads relative to our market database methodology, how we capture both System 1 and System 2 insight. We've innovated in the breadth of tools we use, from the most advanced to the fastest and most cost efficient. And last but not least, I'm really proud to say I regularly hear from clients what great people we have on our team, people who are truly experienced and extraordinarily responsive, and I'm always delighted to hear that.
So, COVID-19, I think, changed a lot for a lot of people, right? Both researchers and consumers alike. I wonder if you can tell us a bit about some of the challenges your company faced amid pandemic and how you responded to those challenges.
Sure, absolutely. My dad used to say the most important thing is to keep the most important thing the most important thing. So Department of Redundancy Department. Really figuring out what your priorities are and sticking with them is super important. And we really focused on 3 areas: our people, our community, and our future. With our people, like a lot of companies, our main concern was their safety and their livelihood. So we immediately went to a work from home model. We had already had success because we had already provided people with 1 day a week working from home. And we implemented that full time. And actually, we've already committed that after the crisis is over, we're going to remain work from home 4 days a week. We also expanded our use of Slack from 1 department to using it company-wide. And if you haven't used it, that's a super great tool for internal communication. And we increased our use of Zoom, which aided productivity. So we felt pretty confident that we could keep people in their livelihoods working productively and keep the company running. With our community, it really extends not just to our clients, but beyond our clients. And our focus was continuing to provide quality insight as people's needs just really mushroomed throughout the crisis. And it's important to look back and realize that, one of the first questions was data quality. Like when people were worried about, the world falling off a cliff and everybody getting disease, can they participate in casual market research about toilet paper or toothpaste? We immediately started researching how past economic crises impacted survey participation and the quality of their data. Before March was even over, we fielded 20 previous studies to see if we did retest comparisons, how the events impacted normative comparisons and the quality of insight we got. And we also immediately launched our free COVID tracking study on March 18th, which has now been used directly by us with 13,000 researchers. And it's also been shared by a number of groups to their networks. UBS Global Evidence Lab put it in the whole global UBS portal. Knowledge Hound put it in portals for J&J and American Family and other clients. The New York Times bestselling author Charlene Lee went through one of our reports in one of her podcasts. Bloomberg News carried stories, and even Ohio Governor Mike DeWine used our research to help guide the Ohio restart plans. And then simply put, for our future, we were just determined to come out of the crisis even stronger than when we went in. We really doubled down on growth initiatives, both in money and energy. And thankfully, we ended the year with double-digit growth. And that doesn't even count 2 new tech-enabled platforms that we're launching in first quarter 2021 to drive growth further. So it really comes down to figuring out what is it that is just absolutely most important to keep important, and then just sticking through it all through the crisis to get results.
That's really impressive. With so many businesses that weren't doing quite so well during the pandemic, to be able to report back such incredible growth, it just really shows a lot about how AccuPoll responded to the pandemic. Clearly, you just got it right. And that's really fantastic. But I think my understanding is that you've also provided a good foundation for other people to get it right as well. Some of the studies you've already referenced, but you've also done a lot of work to help to understand the basics of what consumers do and don't want to buy. Beyond that, I know you went a step further to understand those deeper motivations, priorities, and really understand what's coming. So I'm wondering if you can talk just a little bit about that.
Sure, absolutely. And I think that, I mentioned our COVID tracker, which we started on March 18th. We had 10 reports released for free so far. They're all on our website, involving 25,000 respondents to date. And so, thinking about the motivations of how people buy, and we always, every wave we did, we had some questions which continued and some where we tried to stretch and say, what do we think our clients are going to most want? What is the community going to be most curious about? What are the basic human problems people face? So going back as far as March, one of the questions we often asked was, what are your top motivations for buying products today? So Holly, if we asked you that, for example, what would you say?
In general, and I think this is outside of the pandemic, but in general, I do tend to be, my friends and family call me cheap. I call it cost conscious. So that's usually one of my first things that I considered. I think the pandemic kind of made that even more real because, Confirm it's doing great, but you never know, and the minute this happened and I was watching the economy, I was very cautious about money. So cost conscious would be my answer to that.
Well, with a rapid base size of 1, you have emulated the top learning from 25,000 respondents. So, we have a measure of core motivation that we ask people. And we asked them this question. And early on, it was pretty much a dead heat between taking care of my family, health and safety, but then saving money. And very quickly, within, I think by mid-April, saving money took the lead over the other 12 or 15, and then particularly those second and third attributes. And it really took over. And we think that's because, things like health risks, while they're scary, they're not as tangible to people as the fact that there was actual negative financial damages to a ton of people. Like in December, one of our measures was how have you seen your savings account change during the crisis? And 42% of adults report their savings account had decreased during the crisis. Now, on average, maybe we're net up because of the stimulus dollars, the economists will tell us. But when 40% of the people are getting pummeled, that affects things. So when we look across some of the other learnings, we see that the consumer is divided into multiple uneven segments, not just winners and losers economically, but huge diversity in their attitudes towards the pandemic. We see lots of questions sort of correlate either with 3/4 agreement, 1/4 agreement, or the 5 to 10% niches. So 3/4 of the people, and these may not all be the same people, but pretty much around 3/4 of the people follow social distancing, have kids in remote learning, follow the vaccine news, and generally want vaccines. And I say generally because even those can be divided, about 1/4 want them immediately, 1/4 want to see others take them safely before they take them, and then 1/4, frankly, it's just when it's fast and cheap and easy, then I'll consider it. But totally that adds up to 3/4 who are interested in the vaccine. 1/4 say they probably or definitely will not get the vaccine, period. 1/4 never wear a mask when visiting friends. 1/4 celebrated the holidays with people from multiple households. And then you get down to, where are the outliers, the 5 to 10%? Well, there's clearly 5 to 10% who are even more committed mask avoiders. They won't wear the mask in store. They routinely say they'll wear them below their nose. They'll gather with 11 or more people for holidays, often with no precautions. And just to sort of be politically neutral and look at the other side of the equation, there's also 5 to 10% who are extremely committed to avoiding COVID, who say they never leave the house during the crisis. And so you do have kind of these both extremes. And one of the most interesting learnings is that the mask avoiders, everybody thinks they're callous to the threat of the virus. But when we actually ask them about how severe the threat they think is to their safety, to community health, to the economy, they're just as concerned about the threats to those as mask wearers are when we have them rated. But the problem is they have a competing value here. For mask avoiders, masks have been reframed in their minds as a threat also to American values, traditions, and freedoms. So now they've got to juggle, yeah, I think it's a safety risk, but I also am proud to be an American, and I think I should have the freedom to choose. And so that feeds a lot of debate, a lot of skepticism, probably fuels skepticism whether masks work. And they have very strongly held reasons that they think it's totally rational not to wear a mask, for example. We did a whole report on these and other psychological insights, report number 7, and it's just fascinating. And then finally, last interesting tidbit is just, we did a report on the role of the news media in shaping opinions about the crisis. And we saw that many people put trust in social media just as high as trust in various news sources. And tragically, we saw that story kind of play out at the Capitol crisis, which, was a terrible event, but is a reflection of just the consumer. There are large pockets of consumers with some commonality, but then, you've got these quarter, segments and these niche 5 to 10% segments that are really important to better understand.
I'm sure throughout your research, you kind of figured out what's next too. I'm sure maybe you stumbled on some surprises or at least some interesting insight. Everybody keeps talking about the new normal. What is the new normal? What have you been able to uncover about that so far?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and something that has come up over and over when we talk to clients, not just about our COVID tracking study, but other custom studies we do with them. I think it's really important to take a longer term view of attitudes towards germs and not just think about the past year. And 25 years ago when I was at P&G, there were projects aimed at how do we leverage people's mushrooming fears about germs. And then 15 years ago, I led a consulting project at Kimberly-Clark when they had the same premise. All of a sudden, we're seeing more and more concern about germs. What do we do about it? So people have had these fears over strangers' germs for decades, literally, and they've been growing over that time. And now, of course, they go over the top. When you take that into consideration, plus the fact that, at least 3/4, if not more, have just adopted and been indoctrinated to completely different behaviors than what they had in the past, feeling that they're necessary to protect themselves and others, it's extremely unlikely we'll ever return to past ways completely. Yes, there's definitely going to be a joyful bounce back when we ask people, what are you going to do as soon as this is over? People want to travel, they want to work in person more, they want to gather, they want to visit restaurants. But we know and expect people are going to be continuing to wear a mask in this country in public, much like they do in Asia. They are going to continue to sanitize and clean more. There are going to be people who have more nervous reactions, guttural system 1 reactions to the amount of distance and spaces, to things like salad bars and the like. And they're going to probably still continue to cook and socialize at home at greater rates than pre-crisis. I mean, take for an example, just the instance of work from home. Holly, did you switch from working on location to working from home? And if so, how do you feel about that?
It's been a change over the last year, but I've definitely started to like the work from home world a lot better.
Yeah, no, that's, once again, N of 1 has projected out to 25,000 and millions of consumers. Look, millions of workers are enjoying the benefit of working from home. They're not going to give them up lightly, and companies that try to take them away entirely are going to lose those employees to companies that offer work from home as a key benefit. And when you start walking down the ramifications of that, it changes how and where they work, how and whether they commute, what kind of car they buy, how they eat lunch, how they dress, let alone the millions of people who are displaced and had their jobs disrupted and end up working in completely different industries. So, it's no wonder that when we ask people, after the pandemic is over, completely over, will things go back to normal? Only 35% of the people say they will, because of course, we've all changed from this, and it's not, it even goes further. Like if you ever get and follow some of the municipal tax issues, all of these cities that depended on the income from employees commuting from the suburbs into the city and paying taxes, a lot of them are sort of on a tax moratorium for shifting the taxes to where you actually work from home. But when the crisis is over, I mean, that's actually still working its way through the courts. New Jersey is suing New York for taxes for people who no longer are commuting to New York. It's all over the place. That can bring down cities too. I mean, there's going to be a lot of changes that continue to reverberate out of this once we get past the immediate crisis.
That's very interesting. I live in New Jersey and work in New York. And honestly, to this moment, it hadn't even occurred to me what I'm supposed to do with my taxes this year. But what's interesting, pandemic or not, I still, I think that the one lesson I got from learning more about your business is that it's super important to be really, really agile so that when things pop up, and it could be another pandemic, it could be that your CEO resigns, it could be that, I don't know, something else happens. But you need to be, a business like ACUPOLL needs to be in a position to pivot right away. As a business, how did you kind of set yourself up or become agile the way you are to be able to accommodate this and come out on top?
Yeah, that's a great question. And frankly, if our CEO resigns, I'm in trouble because I have that hat too. I just don't focus on it. But, look, like a lot of small businesses and frankly, a lot of big businesses today, you have two choices. You either adapt and thrive or you expect to become obsolete. Going back to 2012 when I joined and bought the business, I like to point out that within a couple of years, we are a different business and a different company than we were a few years ago, and we'll be even more different still a few years from now. Well, I thought that was true back then. Now it's completely accelerated. Technology is accelerating, competition is accelerating, learning and cognitive science are accelerating, automation and research is accelerated. The need for agility demanded by our clients has grown. And so it's been really important. And fortunately, I think we've had three things going for us to respond to that. And they're really available to everybody. We had a history of invention and always had a culture of trying to break the rules and to transcend the status quo. There are plenty of companies that are, startups or remember their startup days, even if it's been 30 years, and have that proud tradition, or if they don't, then they can at least aspire to that entrepreneurial culture. Second is we don't have a lot of bureaucracy or layers, and any company has the ability to relook at how they are structured and how they operate and take that on. And the third thing's a little harder to emulate, but we've been really blessed to have a fantastic leadership team who's worked together at ACUPOLL. In many cases, at least half of them have worked together 15 or 20 years at ACUPOLL, which is a great testament to the company. And they've had to adapt and respond and adjust to challenges doing studies or Moscow or Saudi Arabia. How do we handle the fact that one of the respondents isn't wearing a burqa? Or how do we, handle that the power went out during research at a NASCAR event? Where do we get generators and, all kinds of crazy stuff. So sometimes there's nothing like a crisis to teach you how to learn and adapt. But now that we're all seeing that the world is moving faster and that you need to do that, I think we should all be taking this mentality of, look, if we want to be successful in the future, we've got to let go of the past and make adjustments and move forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think there's a lot to be learned from situations like this, and watching a company like ACUPOLL and how well you've done is, again, as I said before, it's a testament to these principles work. So everybody should adapt them. But one thing that I think is interesting beyond that is not only are you guys agile and quick to respond to the situation, but you've also developed some solutions so that your customers can be agile. And one in particular that I'm aware of is called Fast Track. And I was hoping you might spend a minute telling us a little about it, what it is, what it does, what benefits it brings to the clients, because I think there's something there that people should definitely think about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I would say all of our projects we've streamlined and worked to be faster, but Fast Track specifically really looks to deliver the overall learnings, to deliver actionable recommendations, and to deliver key data tables for concept tests, for package test, ad test, other stimuli in as few as 4 business days. I think the fact of the matter is if you step back and think about how the research industry does its projects, the reality is that while we, even more than a lot of competitors, work to allow clients to customize everything, there's a hidden cost in timing, money, and complexity that can impact your timing. And the flip side is if you try to standardize everything, it can be too rigid and sacrifice important learnings or even sacrifice data quality. So we've seen companies who create like a basic rigid, here's a concept test, here's the 5 things you can, modify in it. And historically we've been, here's 5, the only 5 things you can't modify are this, or 3 things or whatever. But there are tools out there that are just like, one-click concept test, but they're too rigid and they don't give you the expert guidance or the recommendations that clients need. And we've even seen some research where they promise field times of a few hours. But think about that from a credibility standpoint on data quality. If you want to rep adult or rep category buyer recruit, how do you get working and non-working adults consistently and balanced in between 1 and 3 in the afternoon? I mean, it's nuts. So Fast Track really tries to fit in between there. We leverage pre-planning, appropriate levels of customization, a focus on your most important business objectives, and then some automation technology out of Australia to really give you 90% of what you get from a full custom ACUPOLL study. Even with, titrating down to 90%, that's still a lot more customization than a lot of people's ordinary tests.
Excellent. Very interesting. So that's it's a very interesting offering for your customers. I know when you and I were talking about it recently in preparation for this webinar, you were saying that you've done these comparisons from speeding it up even more, making more rigid requirements versus taking the 3-4 days it takes. And it kind of seemed, if you remember, you were saying that you found there was like with what you're doing, probably a 90% accuracy, and extending it further brought it up a little bit higher, but there was that sort of point of diminishing return. And you were kind of finding that 4-day period was perfect at that balancing point between the good enough, I don't want to say good enough because that almost makes it sound not great, but the point at which you've gotten the return, you've gotten what you need back from the research, you're getting high enough quality for it to be very valuable information without getting to that point where you're putting 5 more days in and lo and behold, you're only getting 5% better data. I'm probably throwing the numbers way off here, but I thought that was a very interesting point from our conversation the other day as well.
Yeah.
That I think people need to understand that it can drag on so long that really isn't worth it anymore.
Right. Yeah.
But there is that balance.
I think you're right, and I think most of the time, anything less than a week, less or equal to a week, doesn't slow most of our clients down. Heck, a lot of them can't get a meeting on the calendar with another teammate in less than a week. And so I think that's true. And I think, there's times when somebody needs something tested overnight, and we can make that happen. But it has to be a lot more streamlined, and it doesn't give the thoughtful engagement on the important business issues as much as when you do take a little bit more time and get that
Right.
balance. You're right. Good enough has a negative connotation, but
Yeah.
but sufficiently great is what our
Yes, I
clients
like that.
are looking for.
Exactly. So my last question for you today before we wrap up is completely self-serving. You are a Confirm It client, and I just wanted to pick your brain a little bit and understand how do we work together, and what have we been helpful? Have we supported you, in doing the things that you do, and why are we wonderful? Told you it was self-serving.
I don't know. That sounds like a Quirk's commandment issue, but look, we've been working with Confirm It since 2009. Okay, I could just stop there. But to expand a little bit, we have had teams evaluate alternatives every few years. We did switch once to the largest competitor and switched back within about a year, and didn't end up using all of the credits we had with the competitor. But they had some capability deficiencies that inhibited our ability to use them. Confirm It saved us money versus doing outside programming. We have 6 Confirm It programmers, Confirm It trained programmers on our staff. That lets us be faster and more responsive to clients and more agile than, if we send surveys out for programming, it takes longer to get them back from our panel partners. Confirm It's allowed us to insert custom code into the platform that's allowed us to create one-of-a-kind techniques like our Spark multi-cognition research for getting system 1, system 2 reactions. And then the merger with Dapracy fuels additional innovation that I can't say anything about, but we'll be leveraging in the future. So it really has been a good partnership. Confirm It has a deep bench of understanding their platform technology and a lot of resources to help when we do need technical resources. And we hope it will continue into the future.
Absolutely, so do we. And I hopefully everybody understands. I was just teasing. I mean, I personally do think we're fantastic, but it's just a joke. But yes, we've been partners for a very long time, and we love the partnership as much as you do. You're a pleasure to work with. And whether it's ACUPOLL or anybody else, I think the Dapracy merger was probably one of the coolest things ever from my perspective. So I'm looking forward to you checking it out, or anybody checking it out. It brings to the table really beautiful visualizations, PowerPoint creation that just streamlines your work so much. So it was definitely an exciting moment for us too, giving us a chance to present data in really, really, really pretty ways, pretty and engaging, ways that get people to sit up and pay attention, help them to understand what they're looking at. I know that's a big challenge we hear from researchers a lot, is that they struggle to make sure that their end client, the business users at the end, are really getting it. The data is like really sinking into their brain, and they know what to do with it. And the ability to bring in some storytelling and visualizations that help to improve people's understanding was a huge win for us. And we're very, very happy to be working with them. So, Jeff, this was great. I've really enjoyed spending the last little bit with you, and maybe we can do it again sometime, do a webinar part 2. But for now, I thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to spend a little bit of time with us, and hope everybody's enjoyed the presentation. We look forward to talking to you all soon.
Thank you very much. And everybody, thanks for listening, and stay well.